The sun glistened over the calm blue waters as a grand luxury yacht cut through the waves. On board, guests laughed, sipped champagne, and admired each other's wealth. Among them stood a woman who didn't quite fit the picture. She wasn't dressed in designer gowns, and she didn't brag about fortunes or fame. Her quiet presence drew whispers, and soon mocking smiles turned into open laughter. "What's she even doing here?" Someone muttered, others chuckled. Certain she was out of place in their glamorous circle, but the woman remained calm. She gazed out at the horizon, her eyes steady, her silence almost unsettling. The more they tried to belittle her, the less she reacted. It wasn't arrogance. It was something deeper, something they couldn't understand. And while the others reveled in shallow pride, she carried an aura that suggested she belonged to a different world altogether. Suddenly, the sound of distant engines rumbled across the sea. Heads turned. From the mist, a massive silhouette began to emerge. It wasn't another yacht. It was a U.S. Navy destroyer, its steel frame gleaming under the sunlight. The laughter stopped instantly, curiosity washing over the crowd. Why was a warship this close to a private vessel? The yachts? Guests exchanged worried glances. Then, in a moment no one could have predicted, the destroyer shifted course. Its crew lined the deck in perfect formation. A loud horn echoed across the waves, followed by a gesture of respect that froze every person on board. The Navy destroyer was saluting directly at the woman they had mocked only minutes before. The air grew heavy with silence. Guests stared at her, their arrogance crumbling, their questions multiplying. Who was she really? Why would a Navy warship pay tribute to her? And what truth about her past could command such an extraordinary display of honor? The woman simply stood tall, her calm smile unchanged, while the answers lingered just out of reach, leaving everyone to wonder what secret power she carried. Across the sea, the guests could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. Moments earlier, they had dismissed the woman as a nobody, someone lucky to even be standing on such a luxury yacht. Now, the sight of an entire Navy destroyer saluting her had left their voices caught in their throats. The air was tense, filled with questions that no one dared to ask aloud. One of the men who had mocked her the loudest whispered nervously, "This doesn't make sense. They don't just salute anyone." His words carried the unease that all of them felt. The woman didn't respond. She simply kept her eyes on the destroyer as though she had been expecting it. That quiet confidence, the same calmness they had ridiculed, now seemed like a shield they could not understand. A few of the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Who could she possibly be? She didn't dress like a billionaire, didn't flaunt jewelry or luxury brands, and yet the Navy's respect was aimed entirely at her. Someone recalled how she had politely refused to talk much about her background earlier, giving only short answers. At the time, it seemed odd. Now, it felt deliberate. The destroyer's horn echoed once more, a deep sound that rolled across the sea and sent chills down their spines. Every salute, every movement of the crew was filled with discipline and reverence. It was not an accident. This was a signal. The woman finally turned her gaze back toward the group, her expression unreadable. There was no pride in her eyes, only a quiet certainty. The guests, once bold and mocking, now stood frozen, caught between fear and awe. The ocean seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for the truth to surface. And though the answers were close, they were not yet ready to be revealed. The guests stood frozen. The laughter and arrogance from earlier replaced with uneasy silence. The Navy destroyer still lingered in the distance, its massive presence impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a passing ship had sought them out, and its salute had been unmistakably directed at the woman they thought didn't belong. For the first time, People on the yacht looked at her differently, as if seeing someone they had completely underestimated. One woman whispered, "She must be someone important." But who? Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the nervousness. Everyone felt. No one dared to speak too loudly, afraid the destroyer might somehow hear. The woman at the center of it all remained calm, her hands resting lightly on the railing, her eyes still scanning the horizon. Pieces of her earlier behavior began to replay in the minds of those around her. How she had been unusually quiet, never competing for attention. How she had avoided answering questions about where she came from or what she did. At the time, it seemed like shyness. Now, it felt intentional, as if she had been hiding something too great to casually reveal. The man who had first mocked her felt his throat go dry. He remembered how she had mentioned once, in passing, that she was used to life at sea. He had brushed it off as small talk, but now he wondered what kind of life? Civilian? Military? Something higher? The destroyer gave one final blast of its horn before slowly pulling away, leaving the yacht in a stunned silence. No explanation had been given, no words exchanged. Yet, the weight of the salute lingered heavily in the air. Every guest wanted to demand answers from her, but none could find the courage. She finally looked back at them, calm as ever. Her expression carried no anger. Arrogance, only the quiet strength of someone who knew exactly who she was. While they remained in the dark, the destroyer faded slowly into the horizon. But its presence lingered like a shadow over the yacht. No one returned to their drinks or laughter. The air was too heavy, charged with a silence that made even the sound of the waves feel louder. Eyes kept darting toward the woman, the same woman they had dismissed only hours ago. But now, the weight of unanswered questions pressed on everyone. One of the guests finally broke the silence. That salute. That wasn't random. Ships like that don't change course for a yacht. They were here for you. His words carried both suspicion and fear. Others nodded, unwilling to admit aloud that they were just as unsettled. The woman didn't flinch. She simply met his gaze with a calmness that felt unshakable. That composure, the same that had made her a target of mockery, now made her untouchable. Every second she remained silent only deepened the mystery. Who could she be that a Navy destroyer would break protocol to honor her? Tension rippled across the deck. Some of the guests stepped back, as if distance would protect them from whatever truth she carried. Others leaned in, desperate to know more. One man's voice cracked as he said, "You're not who you said you were. You can't be." The woman's eyes flickered, just for a moment, as though she carried memories too heavy to share. She turned her gaze back to the sea, and the quiet confidence in her posture grew impossible to ignore. Then, without warning, the sound of aircraft echoed faintly in the distance. Heads snapped upward, scanning the skies. The low hum grew louder, unmistakable. Something or someone was coming. The guests' nerves tightened like a rope pulled to its limit. The air buzzed with anticipation, every second pulling them closer to the truth they weren't sure they were ready to hear. The low hum of the aircraft grew stronger, vibrating through the air until even the champagne glasses on the table began to tremble. Guests clutched the rails, their eyes scanning the sky as dark silhouettes cut through the sunlight. It wasn't just one plane, it was several, flying in tight formation, their movements sharp and deliberate. The tension on the yacht snapped into full-blown fear. "Fighter jets," someone whispered, their voice almost shaking. The words sent a ripple of panic across the deck. Why would jets be circling a private yacht? What was happening out here, miles from the coast? The woman stood steady, her gaze lifting calmly to the sky. Unlike the others, she showed no sign of fear. Her stillness only added to the mystery, as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. Every salute, every sound, every unexpected arrival. None of it seemed to surprise her. The jets roared overhead. So close, the force of the wind whipped through the guests' hair and rattled the deck chairs. Then, in perfect unison, they tilted their wings in a maneuver of respect. It was the same gesture the destroyer had given. Now, it was coming from the skies. Gasps broke out. Some guests stumbled back, unable to believe what they were witnessing. A destroyer salute was one thing, but a formation of fighter jets honoring the same woman. That was something else entirely. This wasn't coincidence. It was a message. One guest, pale and trembling, muttered, "She must be connected to the highest level, maybe even higher than we can imagine." His words hung in the air like a warning. The woman lowered her gaze from the jets and finally spoke. Her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "You still don't understand." The group fell silent, hearts pounding, as the sound of the engines faded into the distance. They knew now that the truth was far larger and far more dangerous than anything they had expected. The roar of the jets faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt as if the sea itself was waiting. All eyes were fixed on the woman. The same crowd that had mocked her now stood in awe, their fear and curiosity twisting together. The weight of the unanswered questions pressed in, demanding an explanation at last. She turned toward them, her calm eyes steady. "You laughed because you thought I was no one," she said softly. "But the Navy doesn't salute wealth or titles. They salute service." Her words cut through the still air, heavy with meaning. Murmurs rippled through the guests. "So,